I've just been speaking in the break with 3 or 4 different people who are here today because they have aged parents or grandparents in one case who are going through the process of diagnosis, and their comments were that this information provided by Dr. Bader was timely and very, very important to them. We thank you so much for what you shared with us today. It is my pleasure to introduce 2 friends now. I'm going to 2 of my friends. I will introduce our representatives from the Alzheimer's Society together before they start. And we have, first of all, Jane Pope, who is the North and Central Island Support and Education Coordinator for the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia. Jane has worked with the Society since 2004, and she describes her role as helping people impacted by Alzheimer's disease and dementia to live well. That's her job, helping people to live well. She has great passion for her work because her mom lived with vascular dementia, which we heard Dr. Bader describe earlier, for over 10 years, and so she really understands the challenges of being a caregiver. Her colleague and friend who will follow her is Tina Biello, and we welcome Tina also. Tina has recently joined the Alzheimer's Society and will be telling us about a program that many of you will be very interested in called First Link. Tina has an extensive background in education and a very keen interest in dementia, again, because she has walked that journey with her loved one. So I ask you to join me in welcoming Jane and Tina.
Good afternoon, everybody. Ooh, it's loud, isn't it? So I'm feeling a little bit relieved by Dr. Bader's presentation. Unfortunately, I'm also a fat diabetic that's just discovered I have hypertension. And so we need to get out of here soon because I need to get to the drugstore and get a blood pressure monitor. Will that work? Okay, so I want to talk to you about the programs and services that we provide. Oops. Apparently I need this thing. Okay. What am I doing, Colette? The arrow?
Yeah, there.
The arrow. This one. Okay. This one got it. Okay. This one there. This one.
But it's just that edge.
Okay, got it.
Like braille.
Okay, so I'm in a lot of trouble. Okay, so the Alzheimer's Society is the only province-wide organization that provides services for people with dementia, both caregivers and people who have been diagnosed with a form of dementia. And we are concerned basically with helping people deal with living well. You know, how to live well with dementia, and it is possible. It is a progressive disease, as we heard, but the earlier you're diagnosed, the better quality of life you can have because you can be prepared for planning for the future. We are also committed to ensuring that public perceptions actually reflect the real issues, and we're looking at also securing funding for research, and we do an awful lot of research. We're the leading source of education and support in BC for people impacted by dementia, and we have resource centres around the province. For the past, many of you actually already know, and I have, you know that I've worked out of a home office in Ladysmith for the last 6 years. So just recently I moved up into the big wide world, and we have a real office in Nanaimo. And so if anybody's interested in coming by and visiting, I'm happy to have visitors. And we also have a new staff member, which is also very exciting. Alrighty, okay, there we go. So ultimately, we would like to see a world without Alzheimer's and dementia. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I would happily give up this job. But we exist to alleviate the personal and social consequences of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, to promote public awareness, and to search for the causes and the cures. Not that way. I can learn. Alrighty. So I talked a little bit about our resource center. We also have a dementia helpline up there, and I have cards on the table, so you don't need to write down that number. If you visit our display outside there, you can certainly pick up a card. And so if you can't get a hold of me at my 1-800 number, you can also call the dementia helpline, and they have lots of answers and information for people who need to talk. We have a variety of information bulletin, In Touch, which is specifically for caregivers, and Insight is actually written by people with dementia for people with dementia, and it's quite a wonderful newsletter. We also do a variety of education. We have a Healthy Brain program, Life After Diagnosis, which is again education for people with early dementia as well as their caregivers and family members. We do Shaping the Journey. It's actually one of the programs that Tina will be taking over. And it's a program, again, a six-week program for people with early stage dementia who want to learn about their disease and their caregivers or partners in care. We have dementia education series and workshops, which include our family caregiver series. And I believe on July the 11th. Anyways, in July, we'll be having a family caregiver series at next door at VIU, and it's a day-long workshop. And the information is all out on our table. We have, I think it's a yellow poster that gives all that information. And it's really great education for anybody who's a caregiver of somebody with dementia. We also provide teleworkshops, and those are done over the phone. You can also follow along on the internet. And they're because many times, we just can't be everywhere doing education, but also people who are caregivers often just can't get away. So they need to be able to access their education at home. And there's a couple of those coming up, one on communication and one on behavior. And again, I think I have the posters out on the table there. We also do support groups for people with early symptoms as well as for caregivers. We have in the Parksville Qualicum area, we have a support group that meets in Parksville the first Tuesday of every month. And then we have one that also meets in Qualicum Beach on the third Tuesday of every month. In terms of a support group for people with early dementia, we have one, the closest one will be in Nanaimo, and that's, I think, twice a month. So that basically covers our programs and services. Let's see what else I've got here.
There is one in Parksville, early stage.
Oh, there is actually an early stage support group that meets in Parksville. It's not an Alzheimer's Society program, but there is one. So if you're interested in that, by all means let me know or Tina know, and we can refer you to the person that's facilitating that group, because I think it should be quite a good group. So I think at this point I'm going to pass over the mic to my colleague Tina. Whoops, that one right there in that corner.
So, hello, I'm Tina, and I am the new First Link coordinator for North Central Vancouver Island, and it's actually thanks to VIHA that, as far as I understand, that I'm here, because the ministry, this was piloted in Victoria, and it was so successful that it's now been launched in 5 different communities in BC, and the society was wanting to bring it to another area, I think the Lower Mainland, and it was VIHA who said, no, we need it on North Central Vancouver Island. So it's really great to be here. So I'm pretty new. I started in February, but it's great to be in the office with Jane. So what First Link is, it's working together to link individuals and families affected by Alzheimer's disease or related dementia to a community of learning, services, and support. So really, we're trying to get people to us as early as possible. So I'm really trying to connect with lots of different healthcare professionals and doctors so that when they see somebody who's perhaps in the early to mid stage, they would refer that client or patient onto me. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't self-refer. People definitely can phone me and get a hold of me and say, we would like to be in your database, and I would definitely put you in the system. So what happens is I get a hold of the family, and it's just a way of communicating with families consistently. So every 3 months I phone and say, this is what's going on now in the community. Are you interested in this? And because Jane is doing all sorts of education programs at all different times, you might not be able to attend one in July, but 3 months later there might be one going on, and I would let you know about that. So, and as well, there's a bulletin that comes out, a First Link bulletin with everything listed, not just what the Alzheimer's Society does, but other community organizations in your community. And so because we're responsible from basically north of the Malahat to Port Hardy and over to Tofino, it's a very large area, so it's great to get it going up here too. So the other part of my job that I'm very excited about is called Minds in Motion. And this is a fitness and social activity program, again launched in Victoria, and I had the pleasure of going to be part of it to see. And the first one was done in this, Perks. I don't think that's Esquimalt. No. Anyway, so these are the participants from the Perks Community Center. And what happens is it's a fitness and social activity program. So it's 45 minutes of fitness for the person with dementia and their caregiver with low impact fitness, just like an OsteoFit. And then 45 minutes to an hour of social activities, games, coffee, cookies. And it's just a way to, support groups are great for people who want to really talk about it. This is more of a way to just socialize and get people out and being in a room with other people going through the same thing. So it's for the caregiver and the person with dementia. And I'm just in the process of negotiating this with Oceanside Place, so it should be starting by the end of the summer, I hope. So I don't have anything printed for advertising because I don't have set dates, but again, if you're interested, see me and I can put you on a list. And it would be in the First Link bulletin. If you were a First Link client, you would know about that. So, yeah, I think that's about it.
Thank you. Can I ask if there are questions for Jane or Tina about the Alzheimer's Society and the education that they offer or the support groups that they offer? Do you want to stand up and...
I just wonder if you can give me a telephone number. It's hard for me to get everything down while all of you are speaking. But a telephone number I could call to inquire about some of these various programs you mentioned.
Do you live in Parksville?
Yes.
Okay, so my toll-free number is 1-800
Yes.
462
Yes.
2833.
283. You're in Parksville?
No, I work out of a Nanaimo office, but we're responsible for this sort of whole area. So that's toll-free. So anybody, it's 1-800 462 2833.
And mine, I would give it to you, but our cards are on our table. So if you want to grab a business card on your way out, it'll have all our email, telephone numbers, and all that.
Sure.
So that might be
And are
easy.
some of I noticed there's DVD or something out there. Do we buy those? Can we buy some of those things?
Is that?
They're free.
Yeah, the DVDs are complimentary. You can just help yourself.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Jane. The day-long workshops at VIU, you say they're specifically for caregivers. When you say caregivers, do you include health professionals in that?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Okay, the lady is asking whether our Family Caregiver Series allows professional caregivers to come and attend the education. So the focus is for family caregivers, but I always think it's fine for 2, 3, 4 professional caregivers to come and be part of the education as long as they recognize our focus is for the families. But yeah, by all means. All right? Okay?
Lady at the back?
Oh, I'm here actually because friends and agencies that are starting their symptoms of Alzheimer's. But what I wanted to ask was, on my own behalf, is talking to yourself a symptom? Because I think, oh, I got my doctor, and I don't say that.
So is talking to yourself a symptom? Is that your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Neighbor?
No.
Caesar leader.
I swear on
Any other questions?
I'm not sure if it's appropriate to even ask about specific symptoms at this meeting.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
But I need information on what I assume is a stage. I haven't found it yet on Google. The anger, lashing out, short temper, and just getting worse and worse and worse.
So anger, lashing out, irritability as a
Exactly.
symptom of somebody who is developing dementia? Yeah, and-
Well, I know what he said.
Yeah, thank
Despite
you.
what he said over here, he has been diagnosed.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question.
So the question is about anger and irritability in dementia. Absolutely, you can see it early. You can see it early on as a result of frustration. They put down their hammer, or they put down something and then they can't find it, and it's very frustrating, and it's not their fault, right? So it's got to be somebody else who's moved it. So we often see early on people have a lot of anger over trivial things like that. That is something that one can try to manage by trying to control the environment, to set good habits early on to try and the more you do by rote, the more you do because that's the way you've always done it, it's the habit, then there is less variability, so you're less likely to change things around. There is, as you further decline, some of that initial irritability will go away, but then you can get more trouble with anger management as you reach more moderate stages, and that is, again, probably reflective of just being completely overwhelmed by the situation, right? And having a catastrophic reaction, similar to, although not the same, and I don't want to make people feel that I'm making them childlike, but the same as kids with temper tantrums. They're tired, they're hungry, they're overwhelmed, they're overstimulated, and you have a catastrophic reaction. Same thing will happen with somebody with moderate dementia. Not everybody, but some. And the strategies around that are learning to recognize those signs early and try and distract and change what's happening in their environment so that you can try and prevent that from happening. There are patients where where it's extremely difficult and medication is required, and sometimes people, are unsafe to be in the home because of their the safety risk that they place other people in. And those are situations where we deal with every day, and they need to be in facilities, and even in facilities we have problems and that's with skilled professionals looking after them, not having to look after them 24/7. They just have their 8-hour shift and they can go home and still having trouble, right? So these are the behaviors that can develop in moderate dementia can be very, very challenging to deal with.
Are these behaviors sometimes drug-related? Such as air theft or one or the other?
Okay, so the question is whether or not the behaviors are related to the medications. We have three medications that we use with early dementias of all kinds, and then a fourth medication, which is not covered at all on pharmacare, which we use with more moderate. Sometimes people will because the medications are quite activating. They're helping you to pay better attention so that hopefully you are more aware of what's happening and are better able to encode those memories. So sometimes people can become agitated from the medication, And that we usually figure out pretty quickly. Many times, however, these medications are used specifically to control behavior. And they actually can help with some kinds of behaviors. So it depends on where people are in their particular illness and how they individually react. For any individual that I give a medication to, if one of the cholinesterase inhibitors, if I gave them to 4 people, one of those 4 would not work at all. Okay? And the rest, it works to a varying degree, right? So we cannot predict who's going to respond to the medication and who's not. And over time, people will lose responsiveness to the medications. But, there are people who can be really, severely moderate to severe dementia who are maintained on those medications specifically for behavior. And if we try to remove the medication, behavior escalates and becomes unmanageable. The other set of medications that we often use are the antipsychotics, the ones that we've heard about in the news lately. And that's, really to look at specific behaviors, delusions and hallucinations primarily. They don't work particularly well for aggressivity, and some people can be horribly aggressive. And we've had, we have bad things happen in the home and in facilities with people who have injured family members and injured other residents and injured staff because of their behavior. They can be extremely strong and vigorous.
So this does happen sometimes, it becomes physical aggression.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It can go from, verbal aggression is something we can try and deal with. Once it becomes physical aggression, that's puts whoever is living with that person at risk. And those are the ones that we scoop out of the house and bring them in to hospital and see if we can manage them and maybe return them home and maybe decide home's just not an option.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane and Tina, and I would encourage everyone who's interested, please pick up a card or a brochure from the Alzheimer's Society, and don't hesitate to call. Sometimes it's not easy in this world to get a live person on the telephone and someone who can actually help you. These ladies will be able to help you, and we thank you for being here today. Thank you. Our final speaker for today, and we thank you for being here, is Constable Tanya Kosovich from the Oceanside Detachment. Tanya has come to us 2 years ago from Prince George, and like our other speakers here today, she has had personal experience with a family member who actually got lost from her home, and so that relates very much to the program that she's going to tell us about now, which is Safely Home. Tanya, thank you.
Hello. Basically, I'm just here to talk today about Safely Home, which is a nationwide program designed to help persons with dementia who are lost, and basically it gives us a tool to assist them home. So the Alzheimer's Society has created what's called a Safely Home program. It's also called the Wandering Persons program. And essentially what it is the home or the caregiver will register the person that's suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia with this program. I believe the fee is $35 with you guys. Anyway, the program is pretty... the information that they require is the name, date of birth, sex, a photo, address for contact. No more photos. No more photos? Oh, okay. And basically the description of the person And they basically have all this information. It's available, own medical history as well, brief medical history of the person, and all this information is accessible to us. So essentially how it goes is if we encounter a person, say, with shoplifting, a confused person on the highway, domestic, well, yeah, not that. Confused person on the highway, that kind of thing. What we'll do is we'll encounter them, and usually we have a lot of confusion, and we can't get the proper information from them, and they're scared, and that kind of thing. And then what we'll do is if they do have a bracelet, or we'll use their surname too, we can query our database, which is nationwide, and essentially it'll pop up all this information, so then we can find their contact information and get them home safely. So that's the program. Where do they register? With you guys, I hear?
Safelyhome.ca. Safelyhome.ca.
And essentially, the Alzheimer's Society has also been a key cornerstone in helping the police understand a lot more about dementia and Alzheimer's, people that suffer from those diseases. And essentially, they put together a Safely Home police handbook for all the officers here at this detachment. And that educates us on signs, symptoms, if we have a person that's wandered off, the protocols that might be needed to get them home safely fast. So, does anyone have any questions?
Go ahead. I'm going to talk about the wandering bracelets.
The wandering bracelet is a bracelet that you get when you register with Safely Home. So that's what I think what the $35 fee covers is actually getting. It's like a medical alert bracelet.
The other thing that we might be interested with the RCMP is if you have a person that is suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia and they do chronically wander, an information booklet might be very helpful that you might want to have a copy for yourself and a copy for the police upon arrival. And that should include a current photo, places that they might wandered off to, daily routines that they might be trying to mimic, common coat that they might wear. Clothing descriptions are very helpful. And if we come on scene and we have all that information right off the get-go, and it's not too taxing on the caregiver because they're going to be upset as well, it just helps the process. And it is a 911 call with wandering persons because of exposure and the danger of traffic and so on and so forth. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any technological devices that are being used now, like iPhones that are GPS enabled and that kind of thing?
There's lots out there, but none recognized by the Alzheimer's Society right now, as I know, or the RCMP. The issue with some of the phones is that there has to be somebody on the end to operate the phone, and a lot of times in a confused state that doesn't happen. But I do believe there's some GPS stuff.
There is a phone that people get for their kids, because all children now apparently have cell phones. Of course, except for mine. I hear about it on a daily basis. There is a cell phone that has just 4 buttons for speed dial, and it is GPS enacted. It is designed for children so that they don't have to remember the phone. And so if you can, if the person remembers to carry the cell phone and remembers that, you press 1 and the phone's home, and then you can talk to them and try and figure out where they are. That some people have used that. It is, it's a question of, are they going to remember to have the cell phone with them? Yeah. But for people who are having more trouble with, the cell phones are getting more and more complicated. And trying to remember the numbers, those simple ones that are speed dial, and they're just a few buttons, work really well in some instances.
Jane's got something to add.
We also do have an information sheet out in the wandering package, and the wandering package is available on our booth out front. But there is an information sheet called Locating Devices that talks about them and gives you some information about where you might find them and what ones work and what ones don't, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's in the big envelope that's on our table up there. All right?
Any other questions for Tanya?
Thank you. Yeah, just a question about repeat wandering people. Like, are there parameters around that? Like, I've known people who consistently wandered and wondering, at what point would you recommend they put on, relocated to a different
Can I jump in? let me jump in. So for people who wander and wander more than once, and it's always, the first one is always the unexpected, right? There are lots of strategies that can be used in the home if caregiver family want to do that and have a high enough risk tolerance, right? It's all about what risk you're willing to accept as a family, right? So there are door alarms, there are keyed locks. And I've known people who carry the key around their neck, and they have a deadbolt that locks, which is great unless there's a fire, right? So you've got to have that understanding that you better that there is that risk. But there certainly are a lot of things about alarms, bed alarms, if people get up wandering at night. There are alarms for doors. It's some people put little latches up high on the doors so that people don't think to look for them, which is easy to get out of. Again, though, in an emergency situation, whether or not you'd remember to look there, is anyone's guess. But so it is. I guess the question is more about when they wander, how often they wander, and what risks they put themselves at. So when you're in northern Saskatchewan and you wander and it's minus 40 at winter, that's much bigger risk than if you live in Parksville. There's still exposure, and you can still die, but you're going to die faster in Saskatchewan than here. So it's all about kind of what is the individual circumstance and what's the terrain, right? So if they wander, but you're wandering in an urban setting where people are going to notice that you're wandering around not dressed appropriately for the weather and will do something, it's quite different than if you're wandering in a rural setting and you're going to be God knows where down a ravine. So again, I think it's all about the individual circumstance that's most important.
Marilyn, don't move.
Unfortunately, we happen to be watching a famous doctor show on TV this week who was not in favor of somebody taking too many medications. My husband is on many medications. Oh, this should be great. His last 2 days, he refuses to take anything.
Okay. Can you repeat that? So the question is about too many medications and watching a show where somebody says, you're taking too many medications, so now her husband's not refusing to take any. Okay, so in geriatrics, as a geriatrician, we see people mostly who have a lot of chronic illness, right? So by the time people reach the age of 75, mostly they have 2 or 3 chronic illnesses. Osteoarthritis, high blood pressure, diabetes, something that you've kind of picked up over time. There aren't that many super agers who kind of get to 95 with nothing, right? They're a delight, and I don't get a chance to see them except social, right? But the thing is, some diseases require a lot of medication to control them, right? So if you have heart disease, you're on a lot of pills because you're on a pill, you're on aspirin or Plavix, you're going to be on something for angina, you're going to be on a lipid-lowering agent, you're probably on something for high blood pressure, and all of a sudden you come in with nothing, you have a bit of chest pain, you leave the hospital and you're on 7 new pills. So, and these are all medications that have been prescribed by looking at randomized controlled trials on younger people, right, on middle-aged people. We extrapolate it to use in older people. The problem that we as geriatricians have is some of those medications interact with some of the chronic diseases that people have, because those randomized controlled trials are done on patients who have a single disease. Right? I never see anybody with any single disease. So there's lots of opportunity for drug-drug interactions and drug-disease interactions. And so as geriatricians, we try and whittle them down. Now, by the same token, there's a whole bunch of people wanting us to do preventive medicine as well, right? So you want to prevent osteoporosis, and you want to prevent this, that, and the other thing, so you're on medication to take that. And here on the West Coast, you also feel the compulsion to go into the health food store and buy buckets of supplements, right? So people, the most I've ever had, I had a woman who was on 56 different medications. And she was adamant she wasn't changing any of them. Right? 7 of them were prescribed. The rest were ones that she wanted to take, some of which were duplicates. And I couldn't even get her to stop the duplicates. I think the minimal number of pills that people can be on, the more simplified the medication regimen is, the more likely people will be able to take those medications appropriately. That being said, I mean, some of those medications, depending on what they are, some of them he might very well must be on in order to prevent some big badness. So it's all about trying to look at those medications and go, not so important, vital. And so the vital ones he needs to take. So if the challenge that you have now
To mix it with his applesauce.
Yeah, mix it with the applesauce, pudding. I'm a big believer in deceit. I actually think that's very helpful in some instances. People don't have to know everything. The problem is, I think sometimes with applesauce, the bitterness of, depending on the medication, the bitterness.
I was just joking about that. No, we were in a factory.
Yeah.
He doesn't know I'm here because he gets so upset.
Yeah, but that what really needs to happen is you need to take him into his family doctor and say, look.
Oh, he's a jerk.
Oh. So you need to say, okay, look, this is the situation. From a health perspective, some of those medications are more beneficial than others, and somebody needs to help him decide which ones are most worthwhile, and it should be a negotiation.
Are you available in 20 minutes?
Give me the list. I'll tell you which ones you need.
Actually, we'll take one more question, and there's a couple. Okay, we'll take a couple more, but we did want to actually finish a couple minutes early because I know there are some people in the audience who would like to speak to one of the panelists just one-on-one, as opposed to asking a question in a large group. So we will make that possible. Sir, your question.
I didn't hear much about nutrition or the role of environmental contaminants in dementia. And I'm just wondering, like a lot of people talk about vitamin D3, or they talk about various things, antioxidants and things that can help the brain. And also there's talk about persistent organic pollutants and chelation and things like that as a way of removing some of these things from the body and cutting down on some of the inflammation that might be causing dementia. Could somebody just speak to that briefly?
No, I guess that would be me. So the question is environmental toxins and nutritional supplements and dementia.
Not necessarily supplements, foods.
Foods.
Healthy, organic
Okay.
foods and all that.
So, bottom line, the literature about whether or not there's something in our environment that is making us demented, no evidence for that. No solid evidence for any of that. There are always people who believe that. Okay, I think sadly the things about nutrition are the things that we probably don't want to hear, right? So there is no magic diet that you can take that's going to prevent dementia. There is some soft evidence looking at the Mediterranean diet. So olive oil for your fat, maybe fish oils, but I mean the evidence there is not clear cut. Lots of fruit and veggies and lean protein. There is nothing that suggests that vegetarians or vegans are somehow protected. Yay! I come from Alberta. There is nothing to say that having a steady diet of fish is going to be protective either. The Mediterranean diet is about having fatty fish regularly, and then you make your own choice about whether it's farmed or wild, and you make your own decisions about whether or not what that does to the contaminants that are in the ocean and how that will affect you, right? So it depends on your philosophy. There is no good evidence. All of the, anytime somebody comes out on the media or writes in Prevention Magazine or whatever about some great nutritional something that's going to do a whole bunch of stuff, it's always based on no evidence. Nothing that actually is going to be widely applicable. Any of those nutritional stuff, quasi-science things they're too messy to be clear cut. There is some suggestion that with vitamin D, so D3, that those of us in the northern hemisphere, those of us, certainly in Canada, that we are deficient probably at least 8 months of the year. And I know that, and I still can't seem to recall that I need to take my vitamin D. I did buy it, but I can't make myself take it. I probably should. I think we probably all should be taking about 800 international units of vitamin D a day. 10 years ago, there was a big push that vitamin E was we needed to do that because it would be anti-inflammatory. We put a whole bunch of people on 2,000 international units of vitamin E and found out that they had more tendency to bleed into their brains. So we stopped that. Okay? I'm very wary of nutritional supplements. It's really all about a boring, healthy diet and exercise. And the other things that one can do to try and protect yourself is to make sure that you are trying to do something intellectually stimulating and social. So I think we should all eat healthily and pick up ballroom dancing. You have to think about the steps. You're getting physical exercise and you're doing something social.
Thank you.
One more question. I just have one more question. Marilyn should probably be able to answer it. What's the availability of institutions for Alzheimer's when they get to that stage here in this area?
So the question is about availability of residential care. So, no politicians here, right?
Yeah, there are.
Municipal, that's the provincial responsibility.
So, I think we're underbedded on the island, and I think we're underbedded in certain parts of the island in particular. Things have improved somewhat here in Parksville. You have a new facility that's open. There's a new facility up in Campbell River. You know, the problem is what we really need to have is a bed when we need it. And we don't have that. Because all of our residential care facilities are at 100% occupancy, the ones that are subsidized. When things go badly, as they can do, and people require care urgently, there isn't a bed available. And I think we have a distinct lack of residential care beds specifically for the behavioral management of dementia. So the older individual with dementia who's disoriented and forgetful and needs help with things, there may not be a bed available for them, but those people are supportable at home while they wait for a care institution. The person who has behavioral problems, they're aggressive, they're agitated, they're wandering. Those people need to have a secured place so that they can't wander. They need to have low stimulation. They need to have skilled people looking after them, and we simply don't have enough. And the other thing that's happened in the almost 20 years that I've been here in BC is that although the acuity has gone up in acute care, right? So in the acute care facilities, we are dealing with more and more stuff on an outpatient basis. So you have to be almost dead in order to come into hospital. If there's any way that they can keep you out of hospital, they do. The same thing is happening in residential care. 20 years ago, little old ladies who were a bit forgetful and didn't want to cook anymore went into residential care. Those people are now looked after at home. And the people who come into residential care are mostly, they have behavioral problems. They are much more severely demented. And they're staying in residential care less long. So now we've seen a big shift of people who, when they come into residential care, they're living less than a year. Whereas before they were used to living 3, 4, 5 years in residential care. We still have a mix of some people who came in for physical problems, but the overwhelming majority of people who come into care now are dementia patients, and quite far down their trajectory, and so they're coming in when the entire family is completely burnt out and it's impossible to manage them with intermittent help at home. So no, that's a long answer for, the real answer is no, we don't have enough beds. You know, and there is no appetite in provincial government to get more beds, right? They've created a lot of assisted living spots. I think assisted living is great for a subset of patients, but if people go into assisted living as mild cognitive impairment or maybe even early dementia, they're going to get worse. So we need to have the next level of care. And once somebody no longer can be managed with scheduled intermittent home care, so the moment they become incontinent, not on a schedule, like anybody ever is incontinent on a schedule, they need to go into a place where you can have unscheduled care available.
These are wonderful questions, and we thank you for them, and we thank you again for putting your opinions down on the feedback sheet, which we will take very seriously. To conclude our afternoon, our final remarks are going to be made by Councillor Mark Lefebvre and former Councillor Mike Wansink, and I would like to invite them to the mic to close our afternoon.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. First of all, two of my favorite stories about aging. Joan Collins, the actress that we all know, a few years ago, she was in her 70s and she married a 40-year-old fellow. And somebody said to her, "Aren't you worried about the age difference?" And she said, "Well, if he dies, he dies." And my second story that I love to tell is about the difference between Qualicum Beach and Parksville. You know, there's a story that I stole this from Jay Leno. It was a lady, a 65-year-old grandmother in Parksville who was arrested for armed robbery by the RCMP last week, and she's asked to be extradited to Qualicum Beach so she can be tried in juvenile court. Before I thank the panel, there's a gentleman over here in a blue shirt that's been taping this afternoon, and it's Chris Rains with Rains Broadcasting. Chris is a great corporate citizen. He's doing this on his own time today. And are we going to be able to watch it on rainsbroadcasting.ca? So if any of you want to go home and tell your friends about it that couldn't come today, you can tell them to click on to rainsbroadcasting.ca and they can watch it. How long will it stay on your site?
Forever.
Forever. So we can watch it forever, and maybe we might want to use that. And you'll be forever. All the panels will be forever young. On that note,
you take it off.
Rains is spelled R-A-I-N-E-S, and it's all one word. Rainsbroadcasting.ca. .tv. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, you know, it's a pleasure for me. First of all, I told Dr. Bader that I'll never suffer from dementia because I'm a man. That's what I learned from the session this afternoon. So. But I don't know. My genes are pretty good. I do this in honor of my 94-year-old father, who's living in a extended care residence in Toronto, and he does have Alzheimer's. So I guess we can all tell stories about our friends and relatives that are facing this terrible story. And when I met Lori about 3 or 4 months ago, I had just finished reading a book called Shock of Grey, and the author is a fellow by the name of Tim Fishman. And this is where I learned that the tsunami within the aging tsunami is the dementia, the cognitive issue tsunami, and that's happening. It's happening in all of the countries in the world. He covers France, he covers Japan, he covers China, he covers the United States, and in Spain. So it's happening all over the place, and Dr. Bader can attest to that. So it's my pleasure this afternoon. We'll probably try and do this again at some point in time in the future, but I'd like to thank all of our speakers. Tanya from the RCMP, thank you very much for coming this afternoon. Tina and Joan from the Alzheimer's Society, and don't forget when you leave, the booths out here have all kinds of information. And last but not least, Dr. Bader, thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure, and it was a pleasure listening to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I get the privilege of speaking last. That means I should be shortest. I don't know if I will be. But at the beginning, Lori told you about some of the people that worked in the background to organize this event. And most of that comes from the Oceanside Healthy Aging Initiative. And I should tell you a little bit about that. The Oceanside Healthy Aging Initiative was a self-formed group, which is a collaboration between the Vancouver Island University, the University of Victoria Centre of Aging, VHA, SOS, Lifeline, Joan's at the back, sorry for Joan. We now have Sanford Place on board because of our connection now to the new Healthcare Centre for Oceanside, which was one of our initial purposes. And our intent and our program is to try and convert existing research into healthy aging into active program. You all have availability of information about how to be healthy and as you grow older, and a lot of that unfortunately ends up in File 13 because it's too much to read. So we're trying to create active program. We did one coincidentally on attitudes towards senior drivers. What we did with the research information, it was done by UVic, they created a play about the results from that survey, and it really indicated some of the impacts of loss of driving ability, and the biggest impact, of course, was loss of our sense of independence, and that has a severe effect. Causes depression, depression causes Alzheimer's, etc. Then we did one on falls prevention. We did a couple of falls prevention clinics, one in Parksville and one in Qualicum Beach. That was very well attended, and strangely enough, even 2 or 3 years after we finished that project, there are people who are still taking part in the exercise programs, level 1 to level 4, that means from wheelchair bound to standing freely, in those programs that are staying healthy and preventing falls. And that's one of the largest costs to our health care system, is looking after people who have broken hips and broken knees. 52% of breakages, broken bones, occupy our hospital acute care beds. So if we can prevent something like a fall, that's very, very significant. We had one on polypharmacy, and it was, curiously enough, a subject that came up here today. It was done in a combination between one of our professors at VIU, who's part of our Healthy Aging Initiative, and an anthropologist from UVic. And we found that if you take one prescription drug, you have a 16% chance of an adverse drug reaction. If you take 2, it's 32%. If you take 3, it's 64%, it's logarithmic, which was really curious. And as Dr. Bader said, we have to be very careful about how we take that information, first of all, and how we use that information, because most of those drugs are used and tested on 22-year-old very fit males who are only singly evaluated for that particular drug. We don't know what the combination effects are, and there's no way that we can tell. So you have to talk very carefully with your healthcare professionals, your doctors, and the pharmacists to find out whether the drug that you are now being prescribed is being prescribed to counter the effect of another drug you've already taken or are taking. And quite frankly, it's very difficult for the healthcare professionals to figure that out. So that very often it's try one and try another and see what happens. So don't go off all your healthcare pharmacological assistance. Just be careful and be aware of what you are taking. Then we did one, a Café Scientifique on urban design to prevent falls. That was very successful. And this very project on Alzheimer's and dementia is one of the outcomes of the Oceanside Healthy and Aging Initiative. Now, I know you're bound to ask a question such as, well, how do we find out what you're doing? Well, we are a self-funded or unfunded organization, so we don't have a website and we don't put out much more information. But when we do have a project, we try to publicize it in the local papers. Keep an eye out for those sorts of things. And now that we've been talking about these sorts of issues, I am reminded from one of the presentations, or one of the remarks that Dr. Bader said, is that exercise is one of the things that we can do to help ourselves as a preventive activity. And one of my exercise activities is golf, and I couldn't help but think of the issue when I went golfing just last week. And I'm nearsighted. So I very often ask for a caddy to help me. I went to the golf club and asked for a caddy, and there's not many around. And this fellow was 85 years old, and I asked the pro. I said, I just need someone to see where the ball lands because I can't see where it lands. Can you see? And the pro said, yeah, he's got eyes like an eagle, but he's a little feeble. I said, I don't care if he's feeble. I'll carry my own bag. That's not a problem. I just want to see where the ball lands. So I teed off the first hole, and the ball went down the fairway somewhere. I'm not quite sure. It went, I think, to the right. And I said to the old codger, I said, well, do you see it? He says, yeah, I see it. He says, where is it? He says, I forget. And I couldn't help but think that there are other things that we can do and we can recognize for our susceptibility. One of the things I want to ask Dr. Bader at some point later on is this correlation between higher education and propensity for Alzheimer's. Because I think there is a connection, she can validate it afterward, with some of the activities that we do. Those people who are adept at music create larger neural networks, so there is a lesser propensity for degradation, or more to degrade is what it comes to. Those who speak multiple languages probably have a better chance. And those who are lateral thinkers are probably blessed with greater neural networks and synapses. And I couldn't help but think when she was telling us about gray matter and white matter and the example of the nuns, she said that they used the nuns as a sample audience or a sample group to analyze because they all came from a similar environment. And I couldn't help but think that they probably all had similar habits. I cut off. The last thing I want to leave you with is the good news that even though there's a good potential for all of us to start losing our capabilities, all the evidence shows that we continue to produce new brain cells to the moment we die. And one of the things that helps us produce those brain cells is the oxygenation of the brain, particularly the hippocampus. So exercise is one of the things that we can really hone in on to keep our minds as active as possible. So I thank you all for coming, and thank again all of the people who participated and contributed to this day. Much obliged. We'll keep you informed on the next stage.